Hello everyone, Ollie from Flightcomp, and I'm doing a video today that I've been meaning to do for quite a while, but I haven't got around to it. And I figured I might as well just get it out of the way. And this video is all about F5J. So what is F5J? I post a lot of videos from the contests I go to, and well, F5J contests, and I initially started posting those videos just for, people on the East Coast of the United States or maybe in the Midwest, and for some of my friends in Europe. These are people that already are into F5J flying, and maybe they just want to see what's going on the West Coast, what the contests are like. Of course, the guys in Europe, they don't get to fly American contests, so I made it for them so they could check it out. And I never really imagined that they would get a lot of views. I thought maybe they'd just get a couple hundred views. But they've been getting thousands and thousands of views. My last video got, I think, up to right now, about 32,000. And by YouTube standards, that's not a whole lot, but for this channel, it's a ton of views. And of course, that means people are watching these videos that maybe they're into RC, they like models, any RC stuff in general, but they have no idea what's going on in these contests. And I always get these comments like, what's going on, what's happening, it looks cool, but nobody really has any idea what the point of the contests are. So I thought I'd make this video to try to explain what is F5J. Of course, there's a ton of information. I could make a 2-hour-long video, but I'm just going to try to give like a really brief overview, like what is F5J in a nutshell. And I'll splice in some clips and things like that as I go along. So I've made some really rough notes, like chicken scratch notes. I'm not very well prepared. I'm just going to kind of go off the seat of my pants. And so let's dive right into it. The first thing I want to talk to you about is the models, the gliders that we use. Generally, they're all composite, pretty high-tech, mostly made out of carbon fiber, some Kevlar, some fiberglass. The wings and tails, they have a foam core, usually it's Roacell, which is a very lightweight structural foam, and the carbon fiber material is put over that foam, and they're very light, very stiff for how much they weigh. A little fragile as far as like dent resistance and scratching and dings and stuff like that. But really they have to be built really light to do this kind of flying. There are some rules regarding what kind of models you can use, or the specifications of the models. The maximum wingspan is 4 meters. So generally 99% of the models you're going to see are 4 meters because bigger is better. And planes with big wingspans do fly better for this kind of contest. There are other rules concerning the weight. So there's a maximum weight of 5 kilograms. So your plane can't be more than 5 kilograms. And there is a minimum weight, but that's sort of more based off of the wing loading of the airplane. So for a 4-meter wingspan, you can have different wing shapes, wing planforms, which most gliders do. They're not all identical. The manufacturer designed their own ideal wing, and some have more wing area than others. And so the minimum weight is based off of the wing loading. That way, you don't have to give a specific target weight for every airplane, but you can apply a minimum wing loading. So you can find out what the minimum weight for that design would be by just doing some simple math. So I have a few notes here from the actual rules. So the maximum surface area for the whole airplane, so I think that's wings and tails, is 150 decimeters squared. Again, the maximum flying weight is 5 kilograms. Maximum wingspan 4 meters. Now the minimum loading is 12 grams per decimeter squared. So that is the target you have to stay above for your plane to be legal. Generally, for most airplanes that are available right now, most sailplanes, The minimum weight that's going to be legal is probably in the 36 to 38 ounce range, and whatever that is in grams. I don't have it off the top of my head. Typically, most light models, they're going to be about 40 ounces for like a standard light model, and if you get below that, you're going into like the limit of the wing loading, and those models tend to be more specialized and they're a little more fragile. Okay, enough about the models themselves. There's plenty of stuff on the internet, my website, RCgroups, other vendors' websites, manufacturers' websites, if you want to check out specific models and things like that. Let's get into some of the equipment. So I have some of the stuff here on the bench. I have battery, speed control. This is a altitude switch or altitude device. Very important for F5J, we'll get into that. Then we have an example of a motor. And you can see this stuff isn't very big. It's all pretty compact, small, and lightweight. And then we have carbon fiber propellers here, folding, and a spinner. And there's little rubber bands on here to help the prop fold back when the motor stops. So obviously that would be like that. Now I just have a pod here for a glider just to show you. So generally, most guys will tend to use a 3S battery. Some guys use 4S. The most common size of batteries is, I would say, 650 milliamp to 900 milliamp. This is a 900 milliamp 3S pack. This is an example of a common speed control used, a YGE 35. Other common speed controls are Talon 35s, and for the heavier or stronger planes, you can go to a Talon 60 or a bigger YGE. This is a motor with a gearbox on it. Most guys run a gearbox. Some guys use direct drive. Weights for motors probably range from 70 grams to 130 grams, depending on the power you're trying to get and the weight of your model. But very small and compact motors and gearboxes. Now, I think that the altitude switches are kind of the heart of F5J, and probably one of the more specific pieces of equipment that we use. So this device goes in line from your speed control, like this, to your receiver. It basically intercepts the signal from the speed control to your receiver. And this guy can do a few different things, but I'll just give you the very brief summary of what it does for F5J. When you start your motor, this device will only allow you 30 seconds of total runtime. So the motor will not run over 30 seconds. So if you turn your motor on full throttle, throw your plane and fly it, at 30 seconds, your motor's gonna quit. This device is gonna shut your motor down, and that's per the rules for F5J. The other thing this device does is it will record your altitude 10 seconds after your motor stops. So let's say you launch your model, you're under power for 30 seconds, the motor stops. This is going to wait 10 seconds, then record that altitude, and that's what we call your launch altitude. And that's going to be really important because that's used to actually score your flight. So you need a device like this that will record and display that altitude, and basically when you land at the end of the flight, this screen will show you the altitude, so you can your timekeeper can record it for you. There's other things this does. It can also log some data and telemetry. But that's really not important for the purposes of this video. So, all right, I'm kind of going to break this down into segments. So it'll be the launch segment of a contest flight, the actual thermaling, and the landing segment. F5J, at its heart, is a thermal duration, thermaling contest for RC sailplanes. The whole point of F5J is to find lift, find rising air. It doesn't have to be lift. You can also use like topographical features like a ridge line or trees or a building. Anything that's going to generate some sort of lift and keep your model up in the sky. These models, without any lift, they're not going to really fly for the full 10-minute round. So you need that rising air to get your time. So a typical F5J contest consists of a preliminary contest and a fly-off portion of the contest. The preliminary has to be a minimum of 4 rounds, so that's four flights, and all those flights in the preliminary, they're all 10 minutes long. So your target time, your target flight time is 10 minutes. You're trying to stay in the air for 10 minutes. You can't go over 10 minutes, there's a penalty. So a perfect flight time in a preliminary round for F5J would be 9 minutes and 59 seconds. There's no way you can get a 10:00 flight, because you're throwing your model at a buzzer, and you're going to lose those split seconds that would allow you to get a 10:00. If you actually record a 10:00, you've technically gone over time and should incur a penalty. In the fly-offs, the flight times are 15 minutes, so they're longer, and they can be pretty rough. If flying a sailplane for 15 minutes, it feels like a very, very long time in a contest. So let's just talk about the preliminaries. I think in the rules it says that there has to be a minimum of 6 pilots in each flight. Generally, it depends on how many people are in the contest. In Europe, they get contests with 100 people. In the States, 30 to 40 people in a contest. But generally, you're going to have about 10 people in your flight. Okay, so let's talk about the launch. So you get your model, you walk out to the launch area, which is going to be consisting of, let's just take the example of 10 lanes, 1 for each pilot in that flight. And at each lane, there's a landing tape that's graduated by the meter, and we're going to talk about that in the landing portion, but that's the target you're going to be trying to hit when you land. But you have to go to that landing tape, and that's where you're going to launch your model. You all launch or throw your model in the same direction, and there's a countdown to the start of the launch window. So it's going to say like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, etc. And then there's going to be a buzzer. You cannot launch your model 25 before the buzzer. I think it's a 0 flight. Your motor can't be spinning before the buzzer. You can't start your motor before the buzzer. The model can't leave your hand before the buzzer. So you have to launch the model at the buzzer. And your motor has to be spinning when you throw it. You can't throw and then arm your motor after it leaves your hand. Kind of technical stuff, but you get the point. So when the buzzer goes off, you have a 30-second window, so in your 10-minute round, to launch. So actually, in some conditions, it's kind of beneficial to maybe wait and see what other people are doing, and then launch your plane, especially if the conditions are really, really difficult and there's not much rising air or thermals to be found. If it's really windy, you could wait till 29 seconds and see where people are going and if anyone's doing anything, and then launch. But generally, most people launch right at the buzzer. Everyone goes in a typical contest round. Okay, so we talked about the 30-second window. The time for your flight, the timed, or like your scorekeeper's keeping time. You have a timer with you. He's got a stopwatch. He's keeping like the official time. That time starts as soon as the plane leaves your hand. So, you have to thermal for 10 minutes, but really the 30 seconds that you're under power is kind of like free time. So you're really thermaling for 9 minutes and 30 seconds. Okay. So, when you launch the plane, you have 30 seconds of power. Now, that doesn't mean you're just going to get as high as you can in that 30 seconds and wait for the motor to stop and then start your flight, start thermaling. you want to have a strategy. You want to try to figure out where the lift is, where a good spot is to go to thermal. You might see clues around you in the environment. You know, you might see a dust devil, you might see birds thermaling, you might see changes in wind direction that will lead you to think, okay, there's a thermal over there. So if you have that kind of plan or strategy ahead of time, and you think or you know there's good air somewhere, in your 30-second motor run, you're going to go directly to that spot. That could be in front of you or behind you or off to the side, but you're going to use that 30 seconds to get to that spot and maybe test that air out and see if it's good or not. And if it's not, you can power up and go somewhere else. You know, as long as you're within that 30 seconds, because after 30 seconds your motor's just going to stop. So there's a lot of strategy involved. That's why you see at the start of a lot of these contest videos, guys are kind of going every which direction, and it looks like chaos, but really they think there's a good air here or good air there, and they're trying to go test it out and sniff it out, you know. And most people have the motor on a slider, so it's not on an on-off switch, so it's just like a regular throttle on a normal RC plane. Some guys actually use the regular throttle stick, and then when they go into their landing mode, that throttle stick becomes flaps. I use a slider on the side of the radio to control my motor, but that lets you modulate the power. So if you go to a place where you think there's a thermal, you can bring your motor way back to idle, so you're not getting the power to sustain flight, but the motor's still running. And then you can kind of see what the plane does. Is the wingtip getting rocked up? Is the tail getting swung around? Is there air here? Is it sink? Is it flat air? What do I need to do? And then, because if you were trying to do that under anything over, you know, idle, well, the motor's giving you propulsion, so it's going to be really hard to tell if there's lift there. So you need to be at a low throttle setting. And let's say you go there and you get there at 10 seconds, and you're sniffing around at a very low power setting, and you think, okay, this isn't going to work out, I need to go all the way across the field. Well, then you gun it full throttle, and you try to get to that other spot, or you try to climb and get as much altitude as you can. Now, let's get back to the altitude device itself. This ties into the whole strategy of F5J, because F5J, like we said, it's thermaling at its essence. And the beautiful part about F5J, the most challenging part a lot of times in F5J, is your launch altitude. Because, like I said, this device records your altitude and it's used to score your flight. So, in F5J, you're given a penalty for every meter of altitude that you climb to, that you launch to. So if this device records that you launch to 100 meters, you're given a half-point penalty for every meter, so that's 50 points. That's a 50-point penalty right off the bat. If you go above 200 meters, it's 3 points per meter penalty. That is a ton. That basically can annihilate your whole flight, even if you get your full flight time and a good landing. So this is where the fun of F5J comes in. This is where thermaling strategy comes in. You try to launch or start your flight as low as you possibly can while still making your full flight time. So you can see guys, if there's good air, if there's thermals, if they have a good read, you can see guys launch to 20, 15, sometimes 10 meters or even lower when they start their flight. That is super low. So that's where a lot of the strategy comes in for F5J, and that's what makes it really dynamic and interesting, you know, as compared to like F3J or standard thermal duration kind of flying. So the launch height for the start is really critical, and it involves a lot of strategy. And you know, you can become a hero or a zero really quick, you know, with your launch height. Okay, I think we covered the launch portion. Next, we're going to go into the general thermaling. So let's say you're past that 30 seconds, the 30 second of your motor run, and now you're in a thermal. Well, basically, you have to thermal and keep your model in the sky for another 9 minutes and 30 seconds. And if you get lucky and you find good thermal right away and you climb out really high, well, you're set. And you can just kind of wait it out, and with maybe 3 minutes left in the round, you can start descending and set up for your landing. Other times you need to find multiple thermals, so you might have to hop from thermal to thermal to thermal. You might hit sync cycles in between those thermals. You might struggle. You might, you have a timer with you. He's helping you. He's telling you what the other guys in that flight are doing. So you might have 9 other airplanes with you in the flight, and they'll be, maybe they'll all be in one spot. They'll all be spread out in different thermals, and your timer is there to say, okay, well, this part of the field there's sync, guys are falling out, but on this part of the field the air is more neutral, it's buoyant. Or back behind us there's a guy in a really good thermal, and you use all that information to kind of map out your flight. So if you need to hop from thermal to thermal, you can, your timer's gonna try to help you navigate where to go, what places to avoid, because bad air is just as important as good air. So you want to avoid the sync just as much as you want to get to good rising air. So the middle of a F5J contest can be kind of boring if everyone's in a thermal and things are going well, but it can also be exciting, right? Because maybe only one guy found a thermal and everyone else is struggling and descending. Well, that kind of mixes things up, and that makes it really exciting. And that leads me to another point about F5J, is the scoring. So the scoring, if everyone gets, let's say, 9 minutes and 58 seconds and a 50-point landing, well, they all get the same score, except we got to look at our launch heights, because the guy that went the lowest has the least amount of penalty points. So he'll actually end up winning the round, right? The guy that went the highest, now again, we're saying they all flew the same amount of time and they got the same landing, but the guy that launched the highest, he's gonna get the lowest score in that round. Also, there's plenty of occasions where nobody makes a full 10-minute flight in the preliminaries or in the fly-offs. I'd say it happens more often in the fly-offs, in the longer 15-minute flight. There's plenty of occasions where the air is just not good enough to get a 10-minute flight. But let's say a guy gets an 8-minute flight. Say one guy out of 10 gets 8 minutes, and the rest of the people, the 9 other people, they all get 5 minutes and below. They can only fly for 5 minutes and below. Well, the guy that made the 8-minute flight, he gets full points. He gets 1,000 points for the round. And the other people's score, their scores are weighted compared to his score. So the bigger the difference between his score and the other people's score, the less points those people are going to get, right? So if 9 people fly for 4 minutes and one guy flies for 10 minutes, those 9 people are going to get crushed. If 9 people fly for 1 minute and one person flies for 3 minutes, those people that flew for 1 minute are also going to get crushed. That guy that flew for 3 minutes in a 10-minute round, he gets full points possible, 1,000 points. So the score is like man-on-man scoring, so that makes it really interesting as well, because you can really take a lot of points out of people if you take big risks, if you launch low, if you try to go really far away where no one else dares to go. And if those strategies are successful for you, you can really take a ton of points out of the other people. On the other hand, that can bite you in the butt so bad, and it's happened to all of us. It happens to me all the time. It happens to a lot of good pilots, where you try to use that strategy of taking a risky flight, but it doesn't work out, and you're on the ground in 3 minutes, and everyone else, they're flying for 10 minutes. So it just makes it super fun. That's why I love F5J. Okay, so that is the general kind of thermaling middle part of the contest. We're talking about preliminary rounds here. Then you got to land, right? So let's say time is ticking down. Let's say you have 3 minutes to go. You're really high. Well, you have to make sure that airplane is on the ground before the time is up. So there's a a clock, like a master clock that's counting down, right? It started when that launch buzzer went off, and now it's counting down. And it's counting down the 10 minutes in the round. And at the end of that 10 minutes, when that 10 minutes expires, there's a buzzer. And if your plane is still in the air, if your flight is still underway when that buzzer goes off, you're late. And basically what that means is you get no landing points. Even if you make a good landing, you're going to lose your landing points. Okay. If you fly over a minute past that buzzer, which is really rare, it never happens, but if you do for some reason, you get no points. It's a zero flight, right? But so now the landing. So we have these 10 people standing out there, and they each have a landing lane, and they have a landing tape, which is metered or graduated per meter. So the part at the beginning of the tape and 1 meter away, that's 50 points. They call them bonus points. So if you land your model within 1 meter of the start of that tape, you get an additional 50 points. Now, if you land 1 to 2 meters away, you get 45 points. 2 to 3 meters away, 40 points, etc., etc. And I think it goes down to, I don't know, 10 or 5 points. So this makes the landing important because 50 points can be a lot. But unlike some other contest formats, specifically F3J, and a lot of like American thermal duration style, the landing points are less, and the landing is not as important. So you're less likely to see guys really hammering their airplanes in, trying to get that maximum landing points, because the launch height is actually, in my opinion, more important than the landing portion of the contest. Yes, 50 points is a lot, but generally landings, unless the contests are super, super tight and there's a lot of high-skilled pilots, the landings don't really make or break a contest. It's more about your thermaling strategy and your launch heights. Now, the landing tape is pinned on one end, and it's basically just like a streamer or a ribbon, and you can move it around in any direction you want. I think it has to be stretched out straight, but it can be, you know, to the left or to the right or in front of you or behind you, and you can actually land in any direction you want. So you're going to always try to land, of course, into the wind, but you know, and a lot of times you'll see guys coming in different directions, just depending on what's going on, you know, in that round. And landing is one portion of the contest where you might see a lot of mid-air collisions, because the sky can get hectic in that landing pattern, that approach to coming back to the starting line and coming to the landing tapes, because not everyone's flying the same pattern. Again, this is where your timer comes in really handy, because a good timer is watching your plane on the landing approach and also watching everybody else's plane, and he's going to tell you, okay, you have traffic here, you have traffic here, there's guys off your nose, or there's guys right in your pattern, or there's some guys below you, or whatever, and he's going to help you navigate to get a clean approach in and try to avoid everyone, because you really don't want to have mid-airs. It's no fun. Speaking of mid-air collisions, if you get a mid-air collision and you call it right away, it can be a mid-air on launch, it can be a mid-air in a thermal, or a mid-air in the landing approach on landing. If you say, oh, I've had a mid-air, I want a reflight, and you have to call the reflight right away, I think it's within 20 seconds of it happening, you are allowed to get another opportunity to fly that flight, because you've been encumbered technically. If you don't call it, you can't go back later after the flight and say, I want a reflight. You have to call it right away, and you have to come down and land right away too. But sometimes, if you have a mid-air, well, your model is damaged anyway. So, okay, so we've talked about the start, the thermaling portion, and the landing. We talked about what the landing points are worth. That's the preliminary contest. So everyone that signs up for an F5J contest flies in the preliminary portion of the contest. And then there's obviously there's scores at the end of the preliminaries, first place through last place. Generally, what happens then is there's a fly-off. So the fly-off consists of usually the top 20% of the people in the preliminaries. So let's just take let's say 6 people is the top 20%. So those 6 people get a chance to fly in the fly-offs. The fly-offs are identical to the preliminaries, but usually there's just 3 rounds in the fly-offs, sometimes 4, usually 3, and each round is 15 minutes, so it's much longer than the 10-minute round. It's run just like the preliminaries, same rules apply, but the winner of the fly-off wins the entire competition, right? The preliminary scores generally are used for like year-end standings or championships, but for that contest, the winner of the fly-off wins the entire contest. And in the fly-offs, you generally see guys taking bigger risks. So you'll see lower launches, you'll see guys going really far away, you'll see guys using different strategies, because in the preliminaries you're just trying to basically get to the fly-offs, so you can be a little more conservative. But in the fly-offs, you have to win, and you're flying against the top 20%, the good pilots, and you'll see a lot of exciting flights, a lot of low starts. It's a really interesting part of the fly-offs, of the contest to watch, is the fly-offs. I haven't actually filmed fly-offs because usually I'm in the fly-offs, so I can't film. And the few times that I haven't made fly-offs, it does happen. I've had the time for somebody else. I've had to help somebody else. So again, I couldn't film the fly-offs. But one of these days, I'm gonna film the fly-offs. Okay, so let me just go back over my notes. I think I covered everything. So I hope that helps some of the guys that have no clue what's going on to kind of understand the basics of F5J. A lot of the models, they're super expensive and lightweight and fragile, but it doesn't have to be like that. If you want to try it out, you want to get into F5J, you can fly a balsa model, no problem. You can fly a 10-year-old model, no problem, and have a great time and even be competitive, but you don't have to spend a ton of money to try it. So if it's something that looks interesting, you'd like to participate, but you don't want to spend $2,000 or $3,000 on a brand new setup, well, you can try it. You can fly your Woody as long as it has a motor and a altitude device. You could fly a old TD or F3J plane as long as you put a motor in it, an altitude device. They might be heavier than the most modern F5J planes, but you'll get to try it. You'll get to feel it out, and you'll have a good time. F5J is so unique because, unlike other contest formats, it's just you and the airplane. It's really a pure thermaling contest. A lot of guys, they see the motor in the nose of the model and they think, oh, it's not a pure sailplane. But man, I used to be like that too, because I used to love F3J, and I never thought I would fly anything with a motor on it. But I think F5J is even a more pure thermaling contest than F3J. And you don't need to rely on a team. You don't need to rely on like launching equipment or winches or towers or bungees or anything like that. It's you and your plane and your setup, the equipment that's in your plane. And it's all about thermaling. It's about how low you can go, and it really tests your ability to kind of call air and make a plan and put that plan into action. So I just love it. I'm totally addicted to F5J. So anyway, I think I've rambled on forever. I really hope this helps some of you guys. If this was totally BS and you still don't understand, just put comments in the thing below, and maybe if I read some comments, I'll be like, oh, okay, I didn't do this right, I didn't do that right, and I can try this again and make it even put it in simpler terms for you. But anyway, we'll see how it goes. Hope you guys found this video helpful, and I will see you in the next one.